If you'd like to learn about how you can use JavaScript code and the one-inch swap API to swap cryptocurrencies, and this is the video for you. Don't look any further and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. All right, so let's jump straight into the actual coding. I am using a Mac laptop, so if you have a Windows, then definitely find whatever is a compatible commands or applications that you would use. I'd be using Terminal, which is command prompt in Windows, as well as using a code editor called VS Code. So let's jump in. So first thing I'm going to do is make a folder to hold this code. So I'm going to call it make directory, I don't know, YouTube underscore swap. YouTube swapper, YouTube one-inch swap, right? And then I'm gonna go to that directory. So cd YouTube one-inch swap, and I'm going to install some libraries that I will be using. I'll be using Web3 so that I can interact with the blockchain. So npm install Web3. I'll also be installing Axios. So Axios will allow us to do all the commands with the API, so like get requests. And another thing I'll be installing is called .env. All right, cool. Now npm install Axios, so I can do some communication with HTTPS. And then I'm going to install .env so I can manage my private keys and other variables via the environment variable. Awesome. All right, so now that's installed, I'd like to actually open up this particular directory from VS Code. So I'm going to go new window. Oops, set it right there. Perfect. Yes, I trust the author because it's me. All right, cool. So I'm just going to start with the first file. We are using Node. Forgot to mention that. We are using Node to get this working. So if you don't have Node installed on your machine, you need to do that before you start here. So check on the Node website and you get that installed. So now I'm going to create a file called swap.js. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is import the libraries that I just installed. So I'm going to say 3 is equal to require Web3 library. Axios is equal to require Axios, and I'll just do require .env .config. Awesome. So that would allow me to use those libraries within my code. Next thing I'll do is just create a basic structure. So async function main. And then another function I'll have is async function swapper. Awesome. So I just want to instantiate some variables such as Web3. So before I do that, we are interacting with the blockchain. So to interact with the blockchain, you need to have connection to a blockchain node. Now, thankfully, there are services like Infura that give us access to blockchain nodes. So we would call that the RPC URL. So I will definitely provide that information. Like you'll have this entire file. I'll add it to Bitbucket or GitHub, so don't worry about it. But what I'll do next is I will just create a variable for Web3 where I instantiate the RPC instance. But before that, I'm going to say RPC underscore URL is equal to process.env. And we're going to call it RPC URL. So that would be inside of the .env file that we'll create shortly. And then we'll also need the private key at some point. So I'll just say private key is equal to process.env.rpc underscore URL. No, private key. All right, awesome. And then I'm going to say Web3 is equal to new Web3, the RPC URL that we referenced. And at some point, I would need to add a wallet, but I'll do it now. So I'll say web3.eth.accounts.add, I think. Let me check the internet. Web3 add wallet or add account. Dot create. So the accounts are created, but I know there's definitely dot add. $8 okay. $8 and my reference the private key. Awesome. So what I'll do now is I'll populate the .in file so you can have reference to these two. So I'm just going to create .inf. If you have a GitHub repo, you don't want to actually push this to the repository because it's going to have some private information. So I'm going to add RPC URL, and we're going to be swapping on the Polygon network just because low gas fees and the private key. So if I go on to, I'll just look for Polygon RPC URL. I'm going to use the public one. This is not good for production, obviously, but it'll just be good for me for right now. Just to quickly get access to a public URL. Cool beans. All right, awesome. So back here, so I have the RPC URL and the private key I'll add at some point, just won't add it right now. And cool, and remember, you don't want to commit this to your repository. So yeah, so what I'm going to do right now, I'll actually walk you through the 1inch swap API so you can understand what we're going to do. We will be using 1inch to swap our assets, and I really like 1inch. I use 1inch every single day to swap assets because what it does is it aggregates a bunch of various liquidity sources and it gives you the best price for your swaps. I really appreciate that. So here, if you go to the docs.1inch.io/API, they give you a description of the API and they give you a different endpoint for each one depending on the network. Currently, they're on 5 networks: Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, Optimism, and Arbitrum. So as we walk through, I will first show you it on, so the Swagger will give you access to test the API, and then let's just go straight to quote/swap. So because we're just going to be swapping our assets immediately, I'll just walk through the swap endpoint. So, all right, swap. So the from token is the token that you would like to swap. So let's say you had Matic tokens in your wallet. This is what you'd be using. And the to address is the token that you're swapping to. So let's say you're going from Matic to DAI or Matic to USDC. The amount is how much you'd like to swap. And you have to actually denote this in Wei. Wei is the smallest unit of an Ether. And even though we're talking about the Polygon network, it does use the similar type of just like small unit, or the similar type of unit system, I should say. So you have to figure out what that is. Now, if you just wanted to see what it is for testing, I just go to like Wei to ETH. It's 18 decimal places or 18 points. So if you wanted to represent 1 Ether or 1 Matic, it'll be this much Wei. So when you have to say what you're swapping, you have to represent it in terms of Wei. Where am I? Awesome. The slippage is how much slippage you would like to occur. Now, the price could change during a transaction. So you want to say, you know what, like I don't want the price to change by more than 1% or by more than 0.5%. So you have to specify here. So if you say 1, you're saying you'd be willing to swap this asset as long as the price doesn't change more than 1%. You can also specify the protocols by which you would like to swap. So, you know, like I said, there are a bunch of liquidity sources. If I can show you here, like 1inch, like 1inch and Kyber. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of liquidity sources like 1inch, Kyber, Polydex, QuickSwap, etc. But if for some reason you don't want to use one of these sources, then you can change that in that section. The destination receiver is the person who is receiving the actual currency that you will swap. So if, for instance, that's not you, then you will change that. If it was based on, like, if you're swapping on behalf of someone, you can add the referrer address as well as the fee that they will take from the swap. It automatically gives you the fast gas price from the network. But if you were to choose this, then I think they would try to find the best swap or the best route that would guarantee that your gas price is no more than this number. I believe that's how that works. Disable estimate is really important because actually, do this. Yeah, so disable estimate is really important because let's say you're performing a swap and you don't already have the assets in your wallet, or you just want to check the price of something, then you want to set this to false because essentially it checks to see whether or not you do have those assets in the wallet before you swap. Burn chi I don't know if Chi is I don't know if Chi is still active, but essentially Chi is a gas token, and with this gas token, you're able to reduce the gas fees. But ever since the London hard fork, I think Chi is no longer being used, or it may not be used. So you probably want to read this article to find out about Chi, but I've not used Chi before, so I have not much to say there. Allow partial fill is another one that's really important, because this is where you say whether or not you want the fill to occur partially, or if the entire thing doesn't fill, then don't fill at all. Maybe you just want to swap an asset as a price and you don't care if you get to swap all of it. You might choose this. But let's say the actions that you want to, you might choose false, sorry. But let's say the actions that you'd like to perform going forward requires you to have had swapped the entire asset, then you're going to say allow partial fill to be false. The previous one, true. Sorry, I messed that up. If you wanted to fill partially, say true. If you wanted to not fill partially, say false. You can actually even specify which tokens you would like to use for your route, because when you swap tokens, it could actually go through like a bunch of other tokens. So you can specify those tokens if you wanted to. And that's about it. So if you are swapping from Matic to USDC or Matic to DAI, for example, one thing you have to know is that on a blockchain, there are something called ERC20 tokens, and then there's the native token. So if we're talking about an Ethereum virtual machine type blockchain, the native token is always represented as this 0xEEEE address, and then the other tokens have a specific address. So in this case, this 0EEE would represent Matic, but if it were to be the Ethereum blockchain, then that would represent Ether. So in this case, it's Matic. So let's say we swap from Matic to DAI. So I'm going to get the address of DAI. Cool. All right, and we're gonna swap, I reckon this is 1 because this was auto-populated. Oh, that's 0.1. So let's change that to, yeah, let's see that's 0.1. Why not? 1. Awesome. So then the from address, and then, yeah, the from address, and then the slippage, I'm going to say 0.1. Disable estimate, true. Allow partial fill. I think by default is true, so, and then I'm going to execute. So this here just giving me an opportunity to execute the transaction and see what the response would be. So they said the from token is Matic correctly, the to token is DAI correctly. They both have 18 decimal places. You need to pay attention to this. This is really important. And it's going to be using the Polygon Sushi Swap protocol to do the swap. And they're saying that from this amount, I'm going to get this much DAI. And if we were to check to see how much that is, I'm getting 1.33 DAI. So that's a good price, I think. And here, this is the most important part of using the Swap API. So they're basically giving you the transaction details. So it gives you from, which is the address that you specify that you're going to be swapping the tokens from. And in this case, also receiving the tokens. To, this is a smart contract address of the 1inch API. The data, this essentially encodes all of the data necessary to perform the swap. So it has certain information such as the function name, the assets being swapped, the amounts being swapped, as well as the route that it would take for the swap. And then the value being swapped. It said gas is 0, which shouldn't be. This is the gas limit, so I'll have to just like put a number in here. And the gas price, I think they use fast gas. So if I check to see what gas is right now. So 25. So if I take this number and see what fast gas is. 22. So I guess at the time it was fast gas. So cool. This is what we're going to be interacting with. So let's jump back to the code and see how things go from here. So we know what the URL will be, right? So let's just say we're swapping this DAI, 1 Matic to DAI. So I'm gonna copy this. It has all the parameters that I've chosen and coded in already. Now you could obviously add that in the code as well. And gonna say that put it in a try catch loop. So if there's any errors, you can handle it gracefully. So swapper encountered and I'm gonna say the response is equal to axial stop get. Cool. So one thing I should do is I should put an await, because we want to make sure we wait for the response, because that's going to return a promise. So if we don't put await, then we probably wouldn't get the response because it wouldn't come back in time. And then I'm going to say if there's a response. Actually, no, let me just print the response so you can see it in the terminal. So console.log response. All right, so let's run the code in the terminal. So I'm going to say node. I'm sure they're going to be errors because I know there's an error, but I want the error to come off so you can see what I do about it. Right, so private key must be 32 bytes long. So I didn't actually add the private key to the file yet, but since we don't need the wallet just yet, I'm going to comment this. Cool. So no errors, but nothing printed. Oh, I didn't actually call the function. So I'm going to say inside of the main function, await swapper, and then I'm going to call main. Awesome. So you see it has returned the data. So the things that we're interested in is this section here. So the data returned is everything that we saw here. So it does return some other things, as you can see, other information about the HTTP request. We just care about data. So in my code, I'm going to say if there is a data object, so if response.data, the only thing we care about at this very moment is the transaction data. Then I'm going to print, and then I'm going to say data is equal to response.data, and then I am going to say console.log data.transaction. So we're just going to get that bit so you guys can see that. Awesome. So this is where I called it, and it's just giving me the transaction data. This is everything you need to actually call this transaction, or execute the transaction, I should say, on the blockchain. The only thing that's missing is the gas limit for the transaction. I'm just going to hard code it in for now, just to make things simple. So I'm going to say data.tx.gas is equal to, I'm going to say 1 million, because I think the max gas limit for a transaction, or for a block, sorry, is 20 million. So I'm just going to say 1 million. And see if it prints it. Cool, so you see it's populated it with 1 million as I put it in. Do you notice that the swap root actually changed? And the reason why I think it changed is because now it's saying it's this many more characters. So I figure because of the price right now, the root has changed. So that's interesting. So it just shows that the 1inch API is definitely always looking for the best price for you. All right, so now that we have that, we are so much closer to actually executing this transaction. This is a little bit too easy, but let's keep going. So the next thing I need to do, and I'm not going to show this on screen, is I need to actually add the private key to the file. So the .in file, I need to add the private key, and that way I can have a wallet that I could use to interact with the blockchain. And that wallet would need to have the funds that I'm going to swap as well, because I'm swapping on behalf of myself. So just going to pause my screen to do that, and then get back to you. So I just added the super secret private key, so now we can continue. So I'm going to uncomment this line because now I have the private key, so I can instantiate the wallet or add it to the ETH accounts. As well, I need to change one other thing. So you see, let me remind you. So you see across here, right? when I put in my details here, I said this is the from address, but this is not the actual address that I would be using for this code. So I need to change the from address to the address that's connected to my wallet. So that's right here. So what I will do is I will change the type of quotations so it can handle variables. So I'm just going to change it to, don't know what you call this code, but the top accent type code. And then I'm going to change the from address to a variable, and that is wallet.address, because I only added one account to the wallet, and that's the account that actually has the funds. And I will just show you the funds in my wallet as well, so I can prove to you that the swap actually happened. All right, so you see I have 10 Matic tokens, and I'm going to be swapping it to DAI. I have 3.67. So now that I've done that, I have this connected. Now we can send the transaction. So to do so, first of all, I am going to delete this. Don't need to print that anymore. I'm going to say transaction is equal to await, because we want to wait for the transaction to complete. web3.eth.send transaction. And we have all of the transaction data in the response. So if I could remind you here, the transaction data from to data value, the gas is 0 and the gas price. So we need to also put the gas. Oh, we did that already. So that's 1 million. So yeah, so I could basically just send data.transaction because that's a transaction. And when it completes, I'm going to say console.log transaction.status, just because I know that is something that's going to be returned, the status of the transaction. Better yet, I can say if the transaction status is true, I would like to print success. So I'm going to say swap successful. Cool. And now is the moment of truth. I'm going to run it. So let's just double check everything. So we have the gas, we put the transaction data, send transaction. If I could just show you in Web3 here, send transaction expects, where is it? Why is my scroll not scrolling properly? From to value, gas price, data, etc. We have all of that. So let's go. Oh, swap successful. That took longer than I expect, but it is successful. So if I go into my wallet right now, okay, so now you can see in my wallet that I have 9.35 Matic tokens and I have 4.99 DAI. So the swap was successful. I was able to swap Matic to DAI. So what you can also do, you can also print the transaction hash so you can go see it in a blockchain explorer. You have just completed this tutorial where you can now swap your cryptocurrencies using the one-in-swap API as well as JavaScript. In another video, I'll show you how you can swap the DAI back to Matic tokens. The reason why that one is a separate video because I need to talk about something called ERC20 tokens and token approvals. But this video is the base for that video. So once you've done this, feel free to move on to the other video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you would build anything with this and see you in the next video. Bye.